This is my top list of commuter electric bikes, and right now we're in 2021. I'm just going to talk about the bikes that I'm really most excited about, the customers are most excited about, that I think you should consider if you're looking for a commuter bike. So I'm going to do this list in alphabetical order. I should probably just talk real quick about what makes a good commuter bike, and I think it just needs to have a couple of different features. One, light. You might end up commuting at night. Another thing is a rack. It's good to carry stuff, your books or computer or whatever. And then fenders. Not important to everybody, but we generally think that it's a good criteria to have because it even rains in Southern California sometimes. Okay, so the first bike on our list is the Benno Boost. This bike has been super popular for us because it fits a lot of different riders. It's got two different frame styles, a standard frame and a mid-step frame. It's got a bunch of different motor options. You can get a standard performance line motor at 20 miles an hour, performance sport, which goes up to 28, and then the performance speed, which also goes up to 28, but it has a bit more torque at 85 Newton meters as opposed to the 65 on the other ones. Then you got loads of different options for carrying kids, all sorts of cargo. This is a really great option if you want a bike that can do more. The Boost has 130-pound weight capacity on the rear rack, but I've kind of pushed it to the limit beyond that here and there, but don't tell Benno I said that. The next bike is called the Benno eJoy. Now remember, we're doing this list in alphabetical order, so you might be thinking it's unfair that we're just talking about Benno here. We'll get to the other one, so just stick around. The Benno eJoy is a low-step bike, and it's kind of like a beach cruiser to some extent, but it can also carry more with a 65-pound weight capacity on that rear rack. And it has similar different options for cargo carrying capabilities. It's available with the standard performance line 20 mile an hour top speed, as well as the performance sport, which can go up to 28 miles an hour. This is not such a common thing in low-step bikes, so it's a nice option there. Now, if you like kind of the similar features and design of the eJoy, but you're looking for more of a standard frame bike, Benno has a bike called the eScout, which is more of a standard frame with more classic lines to it, and people really appreciate that. Also has 65-pound weight capacity on the rear rack, available with the performance line motor as well as the performance sport. Now this next bike is in kind of a totally category of its own. It's called the Remidemi. It was introduced a couple years ago from Benno, and it's a small 20-inch wheeled bike, 20-inch by 4-inch tire on there. It's really kind of like a mini bike in some ways, and I think this is good maybe if you live by the beach and you want to be able to ride on some softer terrain. You just want like a fun looking bike. Also has a good weight capacity on the rear rack and loads of different options, as pretty much all Benno bikes do, which is pretty nice. Next on the list is less of an individual model and more like a family of bikes, and it's the Gazelle Medeo. It's available in several different versions. You have the Medeo T9, which is their entry version at $2,500, which for us is kind of a value bike, at least in a high quality bike like this with the Bosch motor and everything like that. That has a 9-speed derailleur. There's a Medeo T10 that upgrades and you get a 10-speed derailleur with the performance line motor. And then you have probably what happens to be one of the most popular bikes for us is the Medeo T10 Plus. That has the Generation 4 performance line speed motor coming in at $3,500. Overall, this family of bikes happens to be one of the more value-oriented bikes, still with that high-quality Dutch design and manufacturing and high-quality components from Bosch. And although Gazelle is kind of new to the US, they've actually been around for over 100 years, and that's part of what makes them the Royal Dutch Gazelle. They're recognized by the royal family as being this special company, and I could kind of see why. I mean, they are pretty special. But overall, what makes them like a Dutch bike is they tend to be a little bit more upright seating position. You have adjustable stems on all of these models, and they can give you that upright seating position for added comfort and just better visibility overall when you're riding the bike. But Gazelle's not limited to just this style of biking. They also have some bikes which are a bit more sporty, and they call that the Ultimate series. There's several different models from them, starting with the Ultimate T10, which has the performance line motor and a 20 mile an hour top speed with a 10-speed derailleur and cassette. This bike's really nice for those that are maybe used to a more traditional type of bike, but they want to get into electric bikes and have something a bit more sporty. This is a really great way to go. It's historically available in just a low-step version, but recently they introduced it in a standard frame. Another interesting addition to the Ultimate family of bikes is these new belt drive versions. This tends to be a very big trend these days for commuter bikes because they're very low maintenance and very easy to use. So they have the Ultimate C8 and the C380. The C8 has an 8-speed internally geared hub, and the C380 has the Enviolo 380-degree CVT transmission, which is one of the most user-friendly drivetrains on the market. But they don't stop there. One of the things that's been very popular for commuter bikes is high-speed bikes, and here they have the Ultimate T10 Plus, and I actually have one behind me here. That bike has the Generation 4 Bosch speed motor with 85 Newton meters of torque, 28 mile an hour top speed. I mean, this thing is really a performance-oriented bike, and for those that really want to go a little bit faster while they're commuting, this is a nice way to go. It's available in the standard frame in the red color, and they also have the mid-step version for those that want something a little bit easier to get on and off of and have a lower standover height. Well, for those of you that watch my channel, you probably know what brand is coming next, and that's Riese and Muller. I mean, I'm a real big fan of this brand. I've actually had to beg them to come to the US. After several years, they finally relented and said yes. I think they're pretty happy. Heiko, I don't know, what do you think? They do an amazing job. I mean, part of the thing is that they have loads of different options, loads of different frame styles, and so it's kind of difficult, like, how to actually, like, make recommendations or say, like, what the best ones are and this and that. So I'm just going to kind of go through the family of bikes real quick so you can perhaps understand them a little bit better. And I'm just going to start first with just their hardtail bikes. So one of the bikes that's been recently updated for this year is the Roadster. So we did a review on this one recently. And they also have the Roadster Mix, which is their mid-step frame. This bike is a little bit different from them. It's a little bit more like on the sporty side. It's slightly narrower tires, but it has all kind of similar options that you'll find on most of the Riese and Muller bikes with a derailleur and the Enviolo hub. This one you don't have the roll-off option as you might find on some of the other bikes, but we'll get into that in a second. But most of the Riese and Muller bikes are available with the belt drive. This one's available with a single 500 watt-hour battery. You can upgrade it to a 625 for longer range, and you have all the display options, which you'll find on most of their bikes as well. The next model I'd like to talk about is the Nevo 3. This is probably the most popular bike for us. It's really special in that it's a low-step bike, but it still has the same structural rigidity that you'll generally find on a standard frame. And you can tell just like this really beefy tubing on there. So they have this integrated down tube battery available with all the different drivetrain options, including the Enviolo hub and the roll-off hub. You get it with an integrated battery on the down tube, but you also have the option to add a second 500 watt-hour battery on the rear rack. This bike puts you in a pretty upright seating position, and one of the things I like with this bike, as with most Riese and Muller bikes, is you have pretty wide tires. This really makes it easier to ride the bike on all different terrain and rougher terrain at that. Some streets like in New York City, they can be pretty rough and it feels like you're riding on rough mountain bike trails. So having those wider tires with suspension is a nice way to go. From the Nevo series, you can look at more of the standard frame style bikes, which is the Charger 3. And that has all the same options. However, if you wanted to get an extra battery on that one, you'll see it on the down tube, where they do have the mixed version for a slightly easier standover height, easier to get on and off of, and that will have that extra rear rack battery. But if you wanted to have dual integrated batteries, you have that option as well, and that's pretty special and unique to Riese and Muller, and that's going to be with the Supercharger 2 model. This one has been very popular for us, and it's one of those things that you just don't find in other brands. But if you wanted some additional comfort and traction, you can opt for what Riese and Muller calls control technology, and that's going to add rear suspension to these bikes. So they have several different models with this, starting with the Delite, which is their standard frame and single integrated battery with no option to upgrade to a secondary battery. However, if you did want a dual battery full suspension version, you can opt for the Super Delite. You might be starting to see a trend here with the naming convention. When it says Super, it means dual integrated battery, as with the Supercharger 2. Now, if you wanted the low-step version of the Delite, you can opt for the Homage. This bike has been newly updated for this year, and it's been just very, very popular. You have all these different options for drivetrain, but with this low step and full suspension, actually got one here. That one, as you can see, it's pretty striking. It's pretty special. I think actually for like standard style bikes, this is one of the bikes that out of all the bikes in the shop, I tend to want to ride the most because it just puts me in a relatively upright seating position, and I still have that suspension. It's not so tough on my back, which I can really appreciate. So that's pretty cool. But as many of you might know, one of my favorite bikes from Riese and Muller is the Load. This thing's really unique, and it's a full suspension cargo bike. I really like it because it's available in high speed, and it makes leaving the car at home all that much easier. I actually decided to get rid of my car in part because I really don't use it. It sat there for 5-6 months, but we'll talk about that another time. But if you're looking for more of a compact bike from Riese and Muller, you should check out the Tinker. This thing's really cool with 20-inch wheels front and rear, but it still feels like a full-size bike, and it's got plenty of power with the Bosch CX motor on their Vario version and the Active Line Plus on the Silent version. So last but certainly not least is Tern. These guys have been really making a lot of moves in this space lately, where they introduced the Tern Vektron, which is a folding electric bike. They introduced this several years ago. It's become very popular for us. It's one of the few folding bikes that doesn't really feel like a folding bike, as it's got relatively wide tires and a very stiff frame, which is a good thing. You don't want your frame flexing around underneath you when you're trying to go in a straight line. But it's actually the only folding bike that we offer in the shop because we believe in it so much. This model is available with the Active Line Plus on the Q9 version, as well as the Performance Line motor on the S10, which tends to be just slightly more popular for that added torque. Although Tern is historically known as just a folding bike company, they really started to spread their wings some more with the introduction of the GSD. GSD stands for Get Stuff Done or Get Something Else Done. This bike is super cool and ridiculously popular. Ridiculously? Yeah, I mean, it's popular. It's pretty awesome. They've updated for this year, and it's been even more popular and more special. So they introduced it a couple years ago. This is a compact cargo bike. It's got a 450-pound weight capacity. We did a video review of this bike along with most of the other ones. If you want to check them out individually, we'll put the links below. But this thing, they just got loads of different options for carrying kids, carrying cargo. You want to use it to carry your family, to do whatever. It gets stuff done. That's the name. And since this year, they introduced it with the new Generation 4 Bosch CX motor, all sorts of different drivetrains now. They now have a belt drive on there, which is, again, as I said, it's been a popular trend these days. They also have it with the Enviolo hub, as well as the roll-off R14, one of the few manufacturers outside of Riese and Muller offering that option, which is kind of cool. But for those of you that don't necessarily need all the cargo carrying capabilities of the GSD, say maybe you just have one kid or one small adult that you want to carry, or you just want to carry extra stuff, they have the HSD, haul stuff daily. This bike's pretty cool, and it kind of is starting to like redefine this special category of bikes that can just do more. I really appreciate that. I think a lot of times people buy a bike for a specific purpose and they don't necessarily know all the things that they might end up doing with it or want to do with it. So to have that capability early on is nice. So as with all the Tern bikes, it's 20-inch wheels front and rear. Has loads of different accessory options. Many of those are interchangeable between the GSD and the HSD with a couple of exceptions there. And it has a 130-pound weight capacity on the rear rack as opposed to 200 pounds as the GSD has. But overall, it's just very adjustable, fits all different rider heights. You got loads of different drivetrain options. with the derailleur on a couple different models. You have a couple internally geared hub versions with the S8i. It even has one version that can shift gears automatically, which is really pretty special. Well, I think that's it for my list. I imagine there's probably bikes that I can add on there, and I'm sure there's probably bikes that you might think that should be on this list as well. You could feel free to leave them in the comments below. Now, you might be wondering why your bike didn't make the list, or bike X wasn't on the list, or bike Y wasn't on the list. I'm not in any way saying that those bikes are not great bikes. Really, I think most e-bikes are pretty awesome, but they just might not necessarily meet our selection process. And part of that selection process includes the motor system. And from our side, after being in this for about 10 years, we choose to exclusively work with Bosch. And we made this decision for a variety of different reasons. And it's really a lot about standards. So one, they're the most reliable system on the market in our experience. They're also one of the safest, partly because of the testing that they perform. They're one of the few systems that has UL listing. And beyond that, they're just very well supported, and they think more long term. I mean, they're a private company, so they don't make these like split decisions that some companies can when they make decisions based on their balance sheet, not necessarily on their long-term vision. And I really respect that. I want to work with companies that think like that because I think like that. Anyway, we're going to make a video on this topic pretty soon. But I hope you enjoyed this, and I look forward to seeing you in a future video. Well, see you soon.